Oh, I see a record.
All right, everybody. I'm so excited to start my first podcast, Become Your Own Hero, Be Your Own Hero, with my former co-anchor, my dear friend, Dave Freilich. Thank you so much for joining me from Austin, Texas, the ATX.
Well, thank you for having me, Loriana. This is my first ever podcast to participate in, and so to be on your first one, that's cool stuff for me.
I'm so excited. I'm looking at the lighting, though. I have like sun shining in.
You have an angelic glow.
I do. What is going on? Anyway, so much for that. This was supposed to be set up right, but anyway, the bottom line is we're going to share our stories. This is for my podcast, so it will be in audio, and then we'll also share it to the YouTube channel. And so I'm so excited to have you as my first guest. And
that's cool.
So thank you. Anyway, so we'll start.
Thank you for having me.
My book, I was just sharing with you before we hit the record button, is that it's called Becoming the Story. And it's all about becoming your own hero. I went from telling everyone's story to becoming the story. And why I felt it was so instrumental to have you joining me for this is because you were there through this pivotal moment for me. You witnessed it. You were there as a friend. But I remember the day when I was at work and I had that excruciating bone pain and I was dismissing it, saying, oh, I must have worked out too hard. Do you remember this?
I do remember that. Of course, it was part of your story before I guess you knew what your story was, weeks, maybe even a couple months, as I remember it, in the fall of 2013. And I just remember you talking about that arm pain and how much it bothered you for a few days. And of course, there were a million ways to explain it away because you are such a workout warrior. Your son Gabriel was so young at the time and you carried him all over the place. And that really made the most sense to me. Like, of course, you've got a young boy on your arm all day, every day. It's going to tire your arm out. It's going to hurt it or something happened. There's a million different explanations for it.
Yeah, there are.
I do remember it.
So for me, it was easy to write off. And so for people just tuning in and maybe not know my story, that Dave knows the story. Now I'm a two-time cancer survivor. But at the time of this, what I didn't know is that arm pain that was brewing was AML leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia. But it was unbelievable because at the time when I had that pain in my arm, when I travel and speak, I talk to people about the warning signs and how we overlook the warning signs to illness. We write them off. And I knew that night I woke up at midnight, which was pretty close to our wake up time. I mean, for me, because I had to flat iron my hair. Your hair looks great, but I was up by 1:45.
Never flat ironed it.
Never flat ironed it. But I was up at 1:45 in the morning every day to nurse my son, get ready for work. And so at midnight, when I had this shooting pain, the first thing we all tend to say, and as a morning show anchor, you say, "Oh, they need me. I can't leave my co-anchors hanging." And a lot of people
true.
Their jobs.
Yeah,
right?
No, it's true. In the middle of the night, the last thing you want to do is call in. We would all talk to each other, and it's a common thing about how tired we are. Of course, we're tired. We wake up in the middle of the night. You were living at that time. Your husband was working in another job in Washington, D.C., and you hadn't gotten the family together yet. So you were mom and dad in the house, carrying them all over the place. Of course you'd be exhausted. Of course your arm would be tired. That made all the sense in the world to me. In fact, it would have been weird if you hadn't felt that way.
Exactly. So when I went to doctors, even over those months leading up to it, I remember telling you, I went to a doctor, I didn't feel well. And he said, oh, it's nothing to worry about. You're just tired. You're the fitness guru. No, you're the clean eating, green drinking yoga enthusiast. So go home and just enjoy your son and get rest. Because, as morning show anchors in general, or newscasters or people in the industry, we tend to burn the candle at both ends because we're covering stories, building sources, going to events, fundraisers, galas. It's a constant go, go, go. And they just told me you need to slow down and said that there was really nothing else that they could do for me, that there was nothing wrong with me. So I liked what they said.
Well, that's right. And one of the things I would think about you, getting to know you over that fall, one of the first things that would pop into my head, think about you, is how healthy you were, how seriously you took exercise and nutrition. It didn't seem to me like you would be facing something like this. Intellectually, that can hit anybody at any time. And I know that's the message you're really trying to get out now. And I knew that then, but you still profile it. So this is a young person eating, again, so healthy, working out every opportunity, get some juice right there. And that's not new.
Where is my husband when I need him to fix this light?
No, it's good light.
I made this in honor of you and Zach and Lauren. This is it's like a date sweet. This is one of the chocolate avocado mousses. So this has, while we're on it, so we talk about, these are the kind of segments that I did and Dave would sit in the corner before he did Food Truck Fridays. This has avocados, which is a good fat, cacao powder, which is 20 times the antioxidants of red wine, a little bit of honey, a little bit of vanilla, and almond milk. And this is my chocolate mousse, no sugar. And these are the kind of desserts that I would make for my clean eating,
you would do that several times a week on the show. What Zach and I and all of us on the show learned to do is to kind of hide around the corner, because Loriana would say, "Oh, there's so-and-so, come on out and try this." And full disclosure, every now and then I'd try something and it would be delicious. And sometimes I'd try something and it would be okay. And sometimes I'd try something and think, how long do I have to keep this in my mouth to just be polite to this person who made it, to get this
until the camera goes off.
And dates are very good, but dates, I remember our meteorologist, Zach, you made a dessert with dates as the sugar, and he ate so much of it that he needed to blaze a trail to the facility to take care of it, because dates,
and it was always a joke,
do their job
about my date sweetened desserts. That same thing my husband says when he'll try something, his eyes get really wide and he's like, it's an acquired taste. I'm like, what? Yeah. I don't understand what part. This is amazing. It's date sweetened desserts. There's no sugar. It's clean eating. And I love to bring and educate, and I was very enthusiastic about it, and I still am. And so I'm glad we can share all those moments. And that's why, in your honor, instead of water, my celery juice. But that was a big thing for me when I was diagnosed. So just to tell everyone, when I was diagnosed, I was the clean eating, green drinking, yoga enthusiast. I would work out with people. You saw me work out with the Houston Texans and celebrities that would come into town. And so I felt like when they told me you have AML leukemia, at first I would call you crying and other friends saying, I feel like a fraud. Like, did I mislead people to say, drink this and you will avoid cancer, and eat this and you can avoid cancer? And so I felt like that was the message I was putting out, like, do this and you're safe. And what I realized is you're not necessarily safe. It just means that you're more prepared and your body's more fit. The bad things can still happen to you. But it took me a long time to get that.
You know, I draw parallels to that, to kind of what we're in right now in the news, talking about COVID-19. The news does a great job, I've been telling people this, of profiling the 98-year-old World War II veteran who gets COVID-19 and still beats it and walks out of the hospital, and the 26-year-old marathoner who's perfectly healthy and a woman and dies from it. And both those things are true, but the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, life is uncertain, but your best bets are to try to take good care of yourself, to work out, to make working out in the rhythm of your life, and to maybe, eat. Some people are going to eat better than others. You're an eating all-star, but even I joke about it, to consistently mix in the good foods, the fruits, the vegetables, to consistently try to scale back some of those more indulgent things as a treat. That's just a good way to live your life, no matter what's going to happen to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know when I got to the hospital, so they did say goodbye to your son. We have a bed waiting for you. Through reaching out through social media, I ended up at Johns Hopkins, as you know. And my doctor said, listen, instead of focusing on the lack of sleep that may have led you here, the stress that probably laid the foundation that also led you here, focus on what you did right. And that was that you prepared for this illness. You showed up fit for the fight. You prehabilitated. And it really struck me, because you think of all the stories we do, and everything's, they're at a rehab facility for after a back surgery or knee surgery, but everything's rehab. And nobody says, hey, I'm prehabbing today. I'm having celery juice and prehabbing.
It's such a great point when you introduce that word. It makes so much sense, because I always think about, someone got sick, whether from whatever it is, an illness or a surgery or whatever, they've got to bounce back. It makes all the sense in the world that the better care you've taken of yourself beforehand, like you said, the more you can do to fight it, the quicker you can bounce back in your recovery, whatever it is, you will be better to fight for your life, as you say, or your health, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And I wanted to ask your perspective. There's so many people, when I travel, when I speak to executives, I speak to busy people like yourself, busy professionals. And I listened when people talked to me, but it didn't really hit a nerve until I became the story, like the title of my book. But how many times, I mean, like in a job like yours, in TV, that you don't have time to recharge and you feel bad to say no to events, or you feel bad that you're not giving enough back because there's only 24 hours in a day. I mean, do you
Yeah.
sit and think about that?
I feel that. And I don't even, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. It's not even outside your house. What about like when you put in a full day of work and like, man, I've got things I got to clean up around here. I've got something, one tree's growing against that. I mean, we've all got more things to do than we have time to do it. And time management is an issue. But some people, I don't think, let themselves do whatever that thing is that lets them relax and recharge. And you should take care of your responsibilities at your work, at home. If you're leading or participating in a family, you should do all that stuff. But you got to take some time for yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to take time for yourself. And one thing the doctors have taught me over time is that stress, chronic stress, is really a fertilizer for cancer. Lack of sleep is also causes inflammation of body. That is a fertilizer for cancer. And I look back and look at our careers. I don't regret 1 second of my career. The peak of my career, the highlight of my career was working alongside you, working at Fox 7 in Austin, Texas, doing national fitness and health stories. That was, you know, everything I could have dreamed of. So for me, I look back and see, okay, I could have cut back here. There were so many stories. I think when I started look back and think of all the stories I started doing from my hospital bed, it was almost partially because I'm that reporter in me. And also I wanted to redeem myself and say, how did I overlook these stories? That it's not that bad things can't happen to you, but the genius of Armor Up, which is what I launched in the hospital, is that you have the chance to become your own hero, to prepare your body for illness with all the decisions you make. Your body's preparing, so you can either take an active role or not. And to me, that was the biggest breaking story of my career, of getting fit.
I think that's so true. It's such a good point. And when you talk about the stress, and I think back at that time, it was really a relatively small window of 4 or 5 months we got to do the show together. All of us, I thought we had a great time.
Oh, we had the best
at work, but it was stressful. I mean, and sometimes good things for you, but they were stressful. I mean, Gabriel, your son, he was young, baby growing into toddler. What a wonderful time in life. But it's stressful. It's busy. You know, I mean, waking up, doing a morning show is awesome, but waking up in the middle of the night, that's rough. That's stressful. You know, so even good things can be stressful. It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
And then having my husband live across the country and me trying to hold down the fort and do it all. And I would say to my husband, why, you know, you look back and you think of decisions you made when you have time to sit in the hospital. And I'll have you share some stories about your dad. But when you're sitting in the hospital, so much time is thinking of all the regrets. Like, why did I not move to be with my husband? Because I didn't want to let go of my career. I didn't want to lose my identity. The very thing I end up losing in the end anyway, because of cancer. I didn't want to leave my career that I loved. So my husband lived in Bethesda, working in media as well, in management. I held down my job, and here I was having a nanny show up at 3 a.m. It was nuts.
I would be stressed out hearing you describe your day. I was like, wow, you know, it was stressful is the right word for it, for sure.
I would hear you and Zach talk about, oh, well, at 7 or 7:30, I go to bed. Our spouses take over the role of watching our kids.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, like my son is screaming and colicky till like 11. And so I look back and think, why did I do that to myself?
One thing I want to ask about in this with you, or bring up with you, because you talk about the arm pain and us saying, oh, well, it was picking up your son. Oh, well, you're just fatigued. We all tend to do that with people when they present a warning sign. Hey, this hurts, or this sore, or this feels weird. And the reality is, one thing I've learned in TV, so many times it is nothing. So it's so tough. Like, you're putting out the message, you know, you do have to get it checked out. You have to go to that scary place to rule out what the bad thing is, because you need to get in that fight right away if that is in fact what it is. And then a lot of times you might get good news that it's nothing, but you need to know. I think for a lot of guys, at least, we're just so phobic of the doctor. Oh, well, it's probably nothing. And if it is something bad, it's going to wait for you. It's not going to just magically go away because you don't get it checked out. I've been guilty of that.
That's a good message for men, because it does take longer. And there are studies that say that it takes longer for men to get themselves to the doctor. And I always say, oh, here's another one. Always get a second opinion, even when you like the first.
Well,
And it's so strange to say that. But the first doctor I went to said, this was before I even thought I had cancer, looked at my counts and said, you don't have cancer. So why would I be like, I'm going to go to another doctor and be like, are you sure? Because I liked what I heard the first time. But
Right.
even when you like the first and someone rules it out, you truly have to follow up.
Yeah.
And so from there, I remember I had someone, I left the news set after the newscast because, we all go through things and we have our own days where we struggle emotionally and have problems at home or problems with our life, and we still smile through the good and the bad and the ugly. And then I would go home and I met with my acupuncturist, had someone put a TENS machine on my arm, and nothing would make it better. And then eventually it went away. Kind of like the warning light in your car that goes away when it says like check engine, that goes away and you're like, whoo, the problem went away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was festering. And so I ended up in the hospital. And as you know, I was there for an entire year, seeing Gabriel only a few times. But something else that we shared in common is that your dad went through his own battle with a blood cancer.
With multiple myeloma, about a year, within a year of you having it. And he had, he's in his 70s at this point, and just was getting some tests done, and he'd had a bypass and was in good health. The things that happened, he had prostate cancer caught early. That was fine. That happens to a lot of men. But in the course of that, he became a regular visitor of doctors that he hadn't been in his life up at that point. And he had a proactive doctor. It had nothing to do with cancer, on a blood test, say, I don't like the looks of something. I can't remember what he was doing. It might not have even been an oncologist of any kind. It might have been his heart doctor. Like, I'd like you to get this checked out. This one reading isn't right. And because of that, they found multiple myeloma in the very, very early stages and were able to get on it very aggressively. He ultimately had a stem cell transplant, but in taking chemotherapy and pills to kind of get ready for it, they knocked it out so much that the cancer wasn't visible even before the stem cell. And his doctor then said, I want to step on its throat. I still want to do that anyway, even though, as you know, procedures like the stem cell made him sicker than he's ever been in his life.
Right.
But step on the cancer's throat, knock it out. And because even at his advanced age, he was an active walker, he was a golfer, he was healthy, he was able to get through that. And he's doing well today, 5 years.
And I'm so happy. And I remember him sending me cards, and it meant so much to me. But going through, after seeing what I went through and then hearing your dad having a blood cancer, I can't imagine, I always tell my husband, even though I'm hard on him sometimes, that I love him, but he's got that crisis management mode that he lacks emotion sometimes. His heart's there. But he had to step away and kind of be that caregiver, but also not show so much emotion that he was crumbling inside. How did you feel as a family member, as a son whose father is going through that?
Well, obviously it's scary. It's sad. There's an uncertainty. The cancer journey, for like we've talked about before, Loriana, there's no family that it hasn't touched in some way. And the one thing going forward about it too that I know you certainly go through, and he talks about, he's been so fortunate, 5 years in good shape, and now he's 77 years old and doing fine. And four times a year now, he goes to MD Anderson and gets that test, and he's like, it's just as terrifying as it was the first time. And then at the end of the night, the day they call back and say, no, you look great. And then that's a euphoric thing, and you kick the can down the road. But once you've been in there, even when you're in remission and you're good, you're never not in there. You're only one call away.
One blood draw away from going back to the hospital. It gives me goosebumps when you say that, because I go tomorrow, and I was telling people, people say, oh, forget that's your past. I'm like, you can't forget it when you live with the effects of it, whether it's the financial toxicity or the physical effects of neuropathy. My feet are burning all the time. You have a number of things that have the effects. And then the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress, like when your dad goes back to MD Anderson, all those thoughts of what he went through, and you're thinking, I am just one blood draw away from something happening, from the other shoe dropping, and it can't drop. Like, I've been through enough. And so many cancer patients, they may not vocalize it, maybe they internalize it, but we all go through that stress. I know I'm going tomorrow to Hopkins, and I tell you what, I'm going to be like a new person tomorrow. When I walk out, I'm going to be skipping, I hope, because such a weight, like leading up to it. I'm cranky. Like, my husband's like, what's the matter? I'm like, what's the matter? I have my appointment this week. Like, you should know that I get cranky this week.
again, it's a high, unlike anything else. When you get that clean bill of health going forward, you may not want to necessarily go through that valley in order to get that high, but that's the journey that every cancer patient's on. But I will say this, and one of the coolest things I think about you in your journey is that you're so proactive and you're such a fighter, and all these things, whether it's prehabilitation or trying to talk about how doctors need to interact better, you're making things better for yourself and for so many other people. And cancer is just one of those things, because there's a million different kinds and so many are so effectively treated now. We know so many of them are not, but like the ball keeps getting moved forward. And my dad has multiple myeloma. That the thing that scared me most when he first was diagnosed is they call that is an incurable cancer. An incurable means just what it says. And yet he's had his doctor tell him at this point, maybe it's because he's a little bit older too, but it said, you're going to die of something other than multiple myeloma. That's what the doctors told him. And that's what he hangs on to. And you think of other famous people, Geraldine Ferraro, the first woman to run for vice president, is what she died of, multiple myeloma. And if he had been diagnosed with this 20 years ago, 20 years from when he was, it would have been a very different outcome. And so we talk about that. Well, what's going to happen to someone who's diagnosed with this 20 years from now? Maybe not only is the outcome better, but maybe the treatment is less painful and invasive.
And less toxic.
Less toxic. Maybe a handful of cancers are eradicated. And then, of course, the moonshot is that someday any and all cancers are gone. And I believe we will see that at some point in time. But I hope that anyone with any kind of cancer has hope, because that's the one thing you got to have to keep going.
You have to have hope. And it's actually, in medical terms, it's called post-traumatic growth, where you go through the PTSD, but then you also have the growth where you see life as a different perspective. My perspective, when someone complains about something small and what may be big to someone else, I'm thinking like, you know what, that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. Like, do I have cancer? No. Okay, let's move on. It's almost in a different way. 5 years to the day, I know you were talking about the milestone for your dad. 5 years to the day that I was celebrating my milestone, that I had survived and saw my son to age 7, which you only have a 25% chance of survival with AML. We put up our Christmas tree early, like we do every October. And then I got the call that I had breast cancer. And it was not from a genetic marker. They said it's from the full body radiation used to save my life. And I know at first, when the doctor had to test me and do the biopsy before it was official and brought me in the room, and she was kind of stuttering. And I said, just tell me, like, if I don't have to, here's perspective again, like the post-traumatic growth. If I don't have to sit in a hospital room for a year, separated from my son with 25% chance of survival, whatever you're going to tell me is going to be nothing compared to what I've been through. And so you gain that perspective, whatever in life, and you grow, and you have to.
That's such an amazing thing to hear somebody say. I think it's important for someone like me, who has not battled cancer personally. We can't say that to people like you, like, oh, you're going to grow from it. Like, that's not for us to say, shut up. But when you hear someone like you say that, it's amazing. And it makes sense that, again, you do just grow. Appreciate a lot. Yeah.
I'm sure even with your dad, that you've seen his perspective change on things, and little things that I've had, like a family member saying, like, you didn't send a card. I'm like, listen, I got a lot going on. If you are losing sleep because I forgot to send your card, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to send that card. It's going to be, but like, not that I don't, it's just that maybe I might be more forgetful. I have a lot going on. But if it's like things that would have started an argument before, I'm like, that's not an argument to me. So your perspective does change. But I wanted to get back to prehab and rehab to fab, that I talk about prehabilitation. All my career, I've always talked about getting fit, and it was to me about getting into skinny jeans, but also being healthy, but I really didn't have a way to define it. And there was a quote that came out from the Clinical Oncology Society of Australia that said, I'm going to read this quote: if we could turn the benefits of exercise into a pill, it would be demanded by patients, prescribed by every cancer specialist, and subsidized by the government. It would be seen as a major breakthrough in cancer treatment. That is huge, and really reiterates everything I've been saying for years, which is my 3 Ps of prepare, present, prevail. You have to prepare your body for illness so you could present well to your medical team and position yourself to prevail. It doesn't mean everybody who's fit's going to win, But if you have 25% chance, like I did, you want all 25. You don't want 10 because you're not fit enough. And
Yeah.
so for me, when this quote just came out, like, I don't know, probably within the last year, and this was my eureka moment, I'm like, I've been validated, because my oncologist from Hopkins would always say, focus on the prehabilitation. He would say, my hands are tied. I have people on this hall who can't get the treatment that you're getting, and they need that strong dose. So find the gratitude in what you can do. And he really flipped my, I mean, it doesn't mean I wasn't depressed. I cried a lot. I turned into a lunatic at times, missing my son, but he really flipped it around for me to have hope and have that sense of control of, okay, I prepared. So even when I won, I kept preparing. And thank God I did, because then I had breast cancer and I prepared and I survived.
I think it's true. And of course, you know, again, we all have different races to run. We all have different missions. And clearly the mission for the rest of your life is this fight against cancer. But if in this country, what's going to take you out in most times, if it's not cancer, it's heart disease. And you can probably say the exact same thing as it applies to heart disease. Getting in shape and being healthy and eating well and saying you're taking care, or you're giving yourself your best shot against all that stuff.
Exactly. And I've had so many people during when COVID started happening, while I was in the hospital with breast cancer and recovering from a double mastectomy, but people reached out where I was a speaker. Even our former news anchor, Catherine Kissel, had reached out from Fox 7. And a lot of people reached out and said, your message is more relevant than ever. Why are you not doing videos? And I said, well, one, I'm in the hospital. But two, and I still can do videos from there. The other reason is I said, I kind of felt bad, like COVID was everything. And they said, yeah, but your message is so relevant to COVID. And it is true that the more fit you are, the better position you are for success, the better you present, whether it's COVID, cancer, heart disease. If COVID doesn't get us where we have to overcome it, then it could be cancer. It's 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women, or maybe it's heart disease, or maybe it's just a back surgery, not just, but back surgery is major too, or knee surgery, whatever it is, the better you go in, the better you can get through it.
Yeah, the one thing, we did an interview a year or so ago on the show, made me think of you, wish you were there. It was an older guy who had put out a book and was a real fitness advocate as he was pushing 80 years old. And he said he had been a couch potato until about the age of 70. So
Wow.
You talk about a late bloomer. But the one thing he realized is in modern medicine, once you hit 70 or so, really no matter what shape you're in or certain ages, you're more likely than not to stay alive at 80, 85, 90. It doesn't mean you're going to have necessarily a great quality of life. It means we're going to be able to keep you alive. So his take was, I want to have good life, active life.
Yeah.
You don't want to be, if you're fortunate enough, and we talk about all these disease, cancer and all these things, if you're fortunate enough to get a good long life, you want it to be a good long life,
Absolutely.
of good quality toward the end. And that's where fitness comes in too. It helps everything all at the same time.
It does. And I know I've talked to so many friends who aren't into fitness, and I know they look at me and they nod and they're like, that's a good cause. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, I remember I was so fit, and I'm going from like doing triathlons to walking to the bathroom, seeing like a marathon. So I would really say you have got to get fit, like in whether it's walking a golf course, dancing, running, walking, whatever it is that you can do really could make an impact. And then, you know, it's the 3 Ps. And then the 4th P, if anything ever happens to you, it's my unofficial P, is being a pain in the neck, or there's a better term for that. But you have to advocate for yourself and push for answers. And I'm sure your dad had to do the very same thing. So for me, it was really like the biggest story of my career, is having to unravel and discover about prehabilitation, the power of prehabilitation, and how to advocate for yourself, demand answers, because I always say the healthcare system operates in silos, and they're all in their lane, the breast cancer lane, the leukemia lane, and they operate in silos, but we don't heal in silos, and doctors need to talk, and we need to help them talk to us better.
Yeah. And that seems to me to be one of the biggest missions of all going forward, you know, to really have fundamental change there. And I think that's such a good goal to work toward. That's going to take a while, but like you always say, while you work on that, you can get up and walk around your block a couple of times. And there's no reason that you can't do both of those things, but you've got to take care of what you fully control at all times.
I mean, before, you have to admit, even though I was all about fitness when I was on the air, I'd always be like, hold the camera higher, make me look thinner, right? I'd say,
I would never be in front of a low camera. I mean, even now, Lorianne, I'm trying to kind of do this deal because I know the rule you taught me about the high camera for sure.
and you're so thin, but I would always drive everybody crazy in the studio saying, can you put it higher so you can make my neck look thinner? Oh, somebody's at my door, but I'm going to keep talking. Anyway.
That makes me feel better in case my dog is about to go nuts at any point in time here. This is a real active, interactive podcast.
Yes, it is an interactive podcast. And now I forgot because someone was at the door. My last thing I was going to talk about before we go, but hey, I'm doing a podcast, guys. So just let your friend in and carry on. Come on, she can come in. We're going to keep going.
They're being nice and active.
They are being
the message.
Nice and active.
Not in front of a screen.
That's what I told Gabriel. You got to go prehab to fab. Got to work out.
Right. Hey, he's doing it. Yeah.
The last thing is putting equal value to mental and physical health. We put so much into physical health, and we also have to focus on our mental health. And that goes for no matter what your job is, what your career is. And people, they don't realize that even with, when you're on TV, the cameras may be on, but everybody has their own struggles. Yeah. And people need to understand that we all need mental health is okay. Getting a therapist for whatever reason is okay.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it definitely is. I'm guilty of that. Like, again, not knowing what someone else is going through. And sometimes you only see like, man, they were a real piece of work today or something. And, like you said earlier, we all try to keep it together for everyone else and try to not burden other people and do our jobs, but you do need to take care of yourself. And I don't presume to know what that looks like for some people. I think it looks very different for some people than others. Some people might need a little more help in that than others, but,
and that's one way to become your own hero. That's diet, exercise, lifestyle, spiritual, financial. So my message is that when you're preparing yourself, or your body's going to prepare itself for you, you have to not just eat clean. Decide about when you wake up, what are you eating? How much exercise are you getting? This toxicity in your life and this stressful life, stressful relationships, stressful interactions you're having that could lay the foundation, financial and spiritual foundation, all that determines how well you can present when life punches you in the face, which it did twice for me.
And I think you've laid out something, and I would just say to people, you would know this better, but that could be a transformation in somebody's life who's not minding the store right now, physically, maybe like they'd like to, financially, like they'd like to, a million other ways. That's not going to change overnight. Discipline in, saving a little money, building in a routine to walk around the block before you're ever going to run 5 miles, changing that stuff doesn't happen overnight. So you got to just be excited about doing a little something today that you didn't do yesterday, or a little something for a week or two that you didn't do before. And then you may look up 6 months from now and a year from now and be in a really different place than you are right now.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Every little step can make a difference. Got to just chip at it little by little. But now now that I know the dangers, before we wrap up, the dangers of not sleeping and how it can really be a fertilizer for cancer and open the floodgates for illness. I also know about the lack of sleep and the stress. So when someone goes to stress me out, I'm like, oh, hold up. You are not going to stress me out and cause inflammation in my body. Step away from the scene. And then I'm almost like, Cinderella, like when it gets late, if I know I have to get up really early, I'm like, snap, snap, I'm going to bed. I am not missing my sleep. You are not stressing me out. I work too hard to be alive.
I will say that real fast, because I think that's so important, and that really does go to you, someone who was amazing with workouts, amazing with nutrition, and on that morning show, it was understandable, horrible with sleep, getting 1 or 2 hours a night. And it's just as important as those other, our bodies are made to get rest. It's like plugging in your phone. You've got to recharge.
Yes.
And again, it's almost like that's the joke. Like, I got 30 minutes. No, man, that's not good.
Success, and the wheel will fall off the bus. I know somebody called me and asked me to speak at a yoga conference, and somebody else said, why would you speak at a yoga conference? They kind of like drink the Kool-Aid already. And I said, oh no, because yogis can be just as guilty. I mean, you're going to exercise and eat right, and we check it off and we think we've done everything. But the truth is, if you're not sleeping, you're not restoring cells. And as my oncologist from Hopkins says, the wheel will fall off the bus. you're not going to restore cells, and you open the body for illness and cancer and heart disease and other illnesses.
I've heard a doctor call sleep free medicine. It's just free medicine when you give yourself a good night's sleep for whatever is going on in your body. And again, I want to put that, because our schedules that we have, I don't like to put that on people. That's easier said than done, depending on what job you have, what age your kids are, it's easier said than done. But
you know what I tell my husband? You're going to laugh at this, because my husband is very strict about wearing his mask. He has to wear it at work. He's very strict. But before he puts on his mask, he eats his Pop-Tart and maybe sleeps for hours. And I'm laughing now. I won't be laughing if something happens. But I'm like, listen, everybody, okay, I know the mask, whether to wear it, not wear it is people's rights, and it's become controversial. But the point is, if you are a believer in wearing a mask, and you are wearing a mask, but you're eating a Pop-Tart and you're not working out, why are you it's like having a burger with a Diet Coke. Like, it's a real success. You can't, you still have to build your body up, build its immune system up, and keep your body strong. Like, putting a mask on is great. Okay, but what about the rest of you? So I tell Caesar before he puts that mask on, how was that Pop-Tart? Or how was that 4 hours of sleep you got?
Pop-Tarts are pretty delicious, L'Oreal. Maybe he can have one every now. Maybe like an apple. Well, I've moved on to Kind bars, which
yay!
Good. But our second floor or third floor vending machine's got some brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts, and if I said I'd never bought one, I'd be lying. But,
you'd be lying. Okay, well, remember that.
Fewer Pop-Tarts, more apples, and I'm sure Caesar's trying to do that. I'm sure Caesar gets his share of very good healthy meals, or else he'd be sleeping in the garage. You wouldn't let him in the house.
Yeah, well, last night I made him turkey burgers, and then I had a keto key lime pie made with cashews and coconut cream, and he said it was an acquired taste. And I said, well, I packed you turkey burgers for tomorrow for work. He said you could hold the turkey burgers.
Oh, well,
where is the love? I'm trying to help you become your own hero.
So again, so many of the things you exposed us to on the show, the foods were really good. They really were. And so many of them were fine, but it's something like that where you're like, what the traditional, we know what a piece of key lime pie is supposed to taste like, or we know what a burger is supposed to taste like. And so it would taste just like that, except there'd be one thing you'd be like, what is this? What is this? It's not this. Whatever the flavor was in a pie.
He said, don't tell me. That's what he said. He said, don't tell me it's a key lime pie, because you set my expectations differently. Just say it's a naturally sweetened dessert of some kind.
Caesar's a brilliant man.
I threw him off calling it key lime.
That's exactly right. Tell him I have made you a naturally sweetened dessert. I hope you like it. That's a totally different expectation, for sure.
Oh my gosh.
I have made you a piece of meat. Don't worry about what kind it is. I hope you enjoy it. And after that, you'll have a naturally sweetened dessert. That's a totally different meal for him.
He said it's like giving me something and saying it tastes like chicken. Right?
It all tastes like chicken in the end, I guess.
Chicken flavor I could put on tofu for you, but it is a work in progress. We can hopefully change people's diets and habits, at least being aware. Like, one thing before we go is, I tell people at the end of my speeches to take out their phone and put in their phone workout and put it on repeat every day. And so we know the realities that life's going to get in the way, work's going to get in the way, you're going to work later. But every day when you have to delete that off your calendar and you're doing it all the time, it's going to mentally make an impact and say, wow, you know what, I have it every day at 6 a.m. workout. And when I have to keep deleting it off the calendar, I'm like, you know what? I've done that 4 days in a row or 3 days in a row. It speaks volumes. So just even to have it visually, to psychologically, to comprehend that you've missed your armor up moments.
It's like accountability with yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I normally leave people with. My lasting note is put that in their phone. So I know you don't need that because you're Mr. Fit.
No, I'm not Mr. Fit, but I am Mr. Afternoon Workout. So in honor of you today, pretty soon after we leave this, I'll go.
Okay, yeah, you better work out because it's 3 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock, Central.
Yes, it is.
I'll let you work out and armor up for life and get fit, be your own hero. You're going out and preparing.
Yes, ma'am, I am. That's right. It's so good to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Wait, I got to figure out how to stop this thing, right? Stop.